Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar. We're excited to chat about how to use Pylon with Claude or ChatGPT or Cursor or any other kind of AI workflows you're running internally. And then, yeah, Alex, what I was just saying was internally, yeah, our support team has been like using a bunch of different tools. And so we actually have wrapped, sorry, I got phone. We actually have wrapped like a bunch of those internal tools in our own internal MCP. We just like have this internal tool called Toolshed that's like a bunch of miscellaneous stuff, like letting you query our production database and like a bunch of other things like that that are pretty helpful for solving issues that we've then exposed as an MCP and then are connecting into Pylon, which has been pretty cool. This will be, Cassie, you can confirm, but I believe this will be recorded, so you'll be able to still watch it later. And yeah, where's everyone calling in from? You can drop it in the chat. We'll say hi. Nice, all over. Nice. I think Alex is in SF. I'm normally in SF too, but in New York right now, opening up our New York office and visiting some of our customers out here. We can, seems like, yeah, a lot of people are in here. We can start to get started. So yeah, excited to talk about basically the AI tooling landscape has been evolving super fast, both with main kind of like model players and also with like lots of startups pushing a bunch of different AI functionality into their product. And it's pretty interesting to think about how these all work together. And so we're seeing a lot of people, including ourselves internally and Alex at BrainTrust, a lot of other customers adopting workflows where you're either connecting Pylon, you're kind of in both directions, connecting Pylon with all of these tools and connecting those tools back with Pylon, and all of your whole like software stack is working together in like interesting ways now. And so we're excited to chat about that more. Alex and I will both show some like concrete workflows that our teams are doing to actually leverage some of these connections. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a good conversation. But I'll just quickly introduce myself and then toss it over to you, Alex, as well. So I'm Advith, one of the co-founders of Pylon. Pylon builds customer support software for B2B companies. So we're an all-in-one support platform for B2B. You can kind of plug in all the different places you might talk to your customers, whether it's in Slack or Discord or Telegram, WhatsApp, email, chat, phone, and we'll ingest all these conversations and give you a bunch of intelligence on it. Both let you actually run your day-to-day support workflow, plug into other tools so you can do neat workflows externally as well, which is what we'll spend a lot of time talking about today. And then also surface insights for your whole across your customer base for a lot of like customer success and account management type workflows. Then pass it over to Alex.
Yeah, I'm the head of customer experience at BrainTrust. And if you don't know about it, BrainTrust is the AI observability platform where engineers are managing their evals and observability of their AI use cases inside of it. It gives them visibility into how AI performs in production and gives you some tools for helping improve that. There's a lot of companies like Notion, Stripe, Zapier, and also Pylon for building their own AI features. Are using BrainTrust to compare models, look for regressions, test prompts as they're developing those use cases. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, excited to jump into now chatting, yeah, about kind of how Pylon is connecting to all these different tools for you and kind of what some of your AI workflows look like. So yeah, when you think about like your whole like support stack or customer experience stack and AI in it, like what are the main problems you're trying to solve, or what's the like mental model you have?
Yeah. I think like the thing that I'm really excited about with AI is that I think that so much of how support and success teams operate is really dictated by having a shortage of labor, where you can't give customers the kind of experience you would really like to for this. But I think that the real reason to provide support is so that you can learn and improve your product and make things easier for the next customers. And if you don't have the tools or capabilities to engage really meaningfully with all of that feedback and with those customers, you're not going to have the improvements for it. People are going to hit those same friction points in the future. And so as AI coding agents have gotten a lot more prevalent, Something I've been really, really excited to dig into is allowing the technical customer-facing teams to more directly ship fixes, provide detailed like root cause analysis, and make sure that we're getting the actual value out of these support interactions, which is that it makes the platform better for everyone.
Yeah, it makes sense. We're doing a lot of the same thing where a lot of people who even for your product is very technical, our product is definitely a step or two less technical, but still a lot of our customer facing teams like want to get access to a lot of these tools and like can do a lot of interesting things with it. So definitely seeing a lot of the same thing. Maybe just to jump into it, since I think a lot of people will be excited for the tactical kind of workflows. I'll go on to the next slide. Yeah, like what does your workflow actually look like today in terms of like how you run your support lifecycle and like where are the different tools fitting in and what is that? Yeah, what's the end-to-end flow?
Yeah, I think like as we've been building out our motions at Brain Trust, I've wanted to be extremely thoughtful for the process that we're using these tools inside of. Of AI can't solve any bad process; it can only make good processes better. And so we like I think some of the teasers from the event you talked about this big diagram that I uh, put in one of our onboarding things, and I have kind of distilled that down to a higher level one, and I will also show like the big flow chart diagram, like a process diagram for this. But like really thinking about moving every interaction with customers through these phases of do we know who they are? Are our Slack channels configured correctly? Do we know what their SLAs, entitlements are of like who is this person at the moment they're reaching out? I think like when you are considering your AI use cases and where you want to deploy that across this process, the context you want to make it available is really important. Of like initially or immediately after the routing and like or initially after people are writing in, uh, for using AI deflection, I think it's really important that all of the information that is publicly shareable things, these are a process that you want to be able to be run autonomously. And so that's what we're using the Pylon agent and knowledge base for of uh, can we get people help as quickly as possible? And then every time when we're not able to answer that upfront, are we able to route that to the best person internally? I really hate handoffs between teams. I think they're incredibly wasteful. I think that what we're going to see as AI keeps collapsing the stack of how we structure roles in the past is that you have fewer tiers, and you have a lot more similarity between engineering and support in how you operate. So routing things directly to the person that's actually going to solve and resolve and improve that issue in the long run. But so we have a very complex routing structure at Brain Trust where like this, our communication with customers goes across sales and success and support engineering and architecture. Like all of these teams are working with customers in these shared spaces in Slack. And so making sure that we're very structured in how an issue will be tracked and routed. We know who's actually online, who's out of office, who's the right person that's actually going to be in the right place. And Pylon's been really great on the triggers we've set up in this and all of the AI enriched fields. I think I have like 20 AI enriched fields that are extremely critical in is this a troubleshooting question? Is this a pricing question? What are we going through here? And who would be the right person in the right time to make this seem like a really easy and straightforward experience when a customer actually runs through it? For the Claude apps and like going through how we work there. I'll talk about that in the operating phase a little bit later. But also going into like the ultimate outcome of all of this and why I think we've really provided, why we're staffing all of these teams, building all this process, investing is, are we actually delivering some kind of improvement back to the customer? And I think the real success metric that all this process is pointing towards in my teams is, did we tell the customer to their face that we have changed something to make this experience better for people in the future? Did we push a new document out that didn't exist before? Did we update something? Did we fix a bug? Did we actually improve our process in some way that we can show the customer, like, thanks so much for writing in with this. We've thoughtfully evaluated this. We've scoped out what it would mean and actually taken some action there. So there's a lot of like more specific like Pylon features that tie in across this flow, of going into how we use the agents, the CRM integrations, triggers and routing, Um, the Pylon MCP is extremely helpful for getting context when we're in that operating phase, and like ultimately ending in, are we actually taking action on this?
And
Um,
just, I'll ask one quick question here because I think this mental model is helpful. Where we've seen this as well, where it's almost this like layers of AI approach, where it's like it's not just like that one canonical thing of answering the question. It's actually also equally, if not more important, to like do the enrichment so you know like all of this data about that customer and all the surrounding context around that ticket. It's also very important that it like lands on the right person. It's also, yeah, and then it's also very important after solving the ticket to do all the follow up work. So could, yeah, we found the same sort of thing, and that you can use AI in every part of that workflow. It's not just to actually answer the ticket, so to speak. I'm curious, like your perspective there.
Yeah, I think that context engineering is the biggest and like largest part of all of this. Of, do you know the information that you would need to know at the moment when the customer is writing in at this next decision point? There was a feature you recently added into the agents that is extremely useful for this. I was very excited about, of having the ability to pass in particular fields as context to the agent. Because like if the agent doesn't know what plan level a customer is on, it's going to
Right.
ask all the questions like, oh, well, if you're on the free plan, if you're on this plan, if you're on that, like you're going to end up spending a lot more time. So being really mindful of like across your customer journey at all these points, what information already needs to be available. And like truthfully, like that's a lot of collaboration with engineering and other teams of, are we building the right visibility and the right data foundation for all of this, of uh, like having pipelines where that can push back into the account level, put back into CRMs, get pulled down into Pylon, and then being thoughtful in how you describe each of these fields inside the Pylon agent feature of like, this is what it will mean if this field is blank or if it has the value inside of it.
Makes sense. Neat. And then, yeah, I think you're now about to show the even bigger flow chart of like kind of how everything, yeah, fits together. And then we'll dive into some of the specifics of like what that looks like in setting up those workflows.
Yeah, this is the one when you were like, "Oh, can you show this on the webinar?" I was like, "Well, I can." It's a lot of it's like a lot of context of going through these phases. Um, I link out inside of like the internal version of this. There's hyperlinks out to specific Pylon triggers and specific systems outside of Pylon, just so that if I'm ever having to bring someone else on board into this, I can point how all these things flow together.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if I want to speak like in too
Makes
much
sense.
detail every piece of it. But I think that when you're building out any process, having a like a flow diagram through it is extremely helpful for mentally modeling. Does it make sense that these inputs would be available at these times where we'll actually connect together? And
Makes
I would
sense.
definitely like highly pressure anyone before you're building an AI use case, understand the process it's going to fit into, because it's now getting extremely low cost to build things and try things, and you will end up with a monstrosity of features and like misaligned experiences if you aren't starting with, what do you want this to look like at the end.
Makes sense. Yeah, we've also noticed that bottleneck overall shifting to like kind of thinking rather than executing, not just in like kind of process design, but also in like building our products. So that makes sense. Would you recommend like, yeah, this basically mental model of it sounds like for each stage in your like workflow, so to speak, like figure out, yeah, essentially what data will be available to the AI at that point in time. And yeah, any more you can say kind of around that and how you think about that?
Yeah, the context that is going to be available is extremely important. Of like I was saying with the known issue deflection phase, that needs to be stuff you are comfortable with having an agent speak to entirely autonomously. Any of that information could be with a shared with a customer without your like a review or approval. So
Right.
I think like a really good pressure test to that is just like, if that information isn't a public link that they could click into, that you're already comfortable having published on the web, like it's probably not something you want the agent to be able to autonomously share. But going down from that, you can get into individual authentication of, for this account, do we feel confident that we know this person's identity? We could speak to it. What are their permission levels inside the product? Uh, like that gets more and more complex the deeper you go into it. But
Makes
I
sense.
think where you get the most value is have you verified what information is safe to share at one point? When you're going into the like internal operating model of what information am I giving my support team, my support engineers, you can be a lot more liberal in things that are only visible in internal notes. You can have
Hmm.
like direct access to your code base. You can have
Right.
internal process conversations, stuff that might not be customer shareable but might be incredibly useful. Um, like I think making sure you're thoughtfully separating those out of who should have access to what is where you're going to get the most leverage.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And we'll send out like some of these slides afterwards as well, so people can zoom in and see some of the specific like kind of points and the specific workflow of like going from enrichment to known issues to routing to operating improvement. I think if we zoom in now on, or not on the slide, but I think some of your next slides zoom in on some of the specific areas of this workflow and some of the internal tooling you've built around it and how you're using Claude, I think, to power a lot of this.
Yeah, we can go on to this next like cloud app if you're ready.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so this is at that operating stage of whenever a ticket has been assigned to like our support team is a developer support team at Braintrust. They're working directly with engineers and AI engineers that are building their use cases. But so there is a hosted application that is running a different Claude code runs for each Pylon issue. There's a initial triage run that has a specialized triage agent that is looking across the Pylon MCP server, semantic search through our documentation and some other knowledge sources, and then also directly looking through our internal code repositories. And that works together to have the starting point where a human is involved of already having a detailed description of here is the issue, here are similar cases from this customer, other customers, here's recent things that we shipped in linear that might line up with this timeline, and specific line by line links to our code base of this functionality is controlled here, this kind of behavior could be explained by this kind of input, or this sort of regression. And then the team members can also prompt follow-ups to Claude inside of this, so that it's aggregated across all this information of like, hey, the customer just said this back to this. Like, I think that might not make sense in this context. What else could help explain it? So having like this starting point of we already know who the customer is. We've already confirmed that none of our publicly known answers answer this question for them. Now we're bringing in a human because this is a unknown, undocumented issue that we really want to dig deep into understanding.
Got it.
So
And
like
the
that,
framing for this is basically like a tool that your support team can use to basically do like a pre-investigation, essentially, uh, on an issue, or is this running automatically? How do you think about that?
this is running automatically. My
Cool.
intent is that like this takes like 3 to 5 minutes to run
Uh-huh.
usually. So
Yeah.
this is at the moment where our Pylon agent has said, I don't know what the answer is. I don't feel confident giving a public response to this. It's escalating
Mhm.
to a team. That then goes through the team routing. And if it's coming to the developer support team specifically, that triggers a Pylon webhook that causes a run to start for this. And so it'll take a couple
Got it.
minutes. And then by usually like it, at the first point where a developer support eng is coming into the ticket, this is waiting and ready
Got
there.
it. Got it. Okay. And then in terms of like what you would recommend to other folks here, like how do you think about, this is basically a different form of enrichment almost, right? Like, it's passed through these initial layers of like context collecting on the ticket. A more simple agent that doesn't have access to all your internal data has taken a pass with the whole mental model of that has only access to public content the customer would have been able to find themselves. And this can, try and give them an answer. And if that doesn't happen, then it like goes to this next enrichment layer where you're like, feeding all the internal data from your different internal tools.
Yeah. What was the question?
How would you recommend like people, how do you think people in the audience can like do something like this basically? Like what steps do you think they can take to, yeah.
It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work of like, I think that Brain Trust is in a really fortunate point of we have a very technical support team of like we are hiring engineers and developers to think about this and to work on this. So like, I think that depending on the skill set you have and the internal buy-in, like your mind is going to vary quite a bit of how important is support and customer experience to your leadership? How important is it to your engineering team? I think that what all of those teams respond really well to is talking about the like exponential impact that you could have on future customer experience from this. I think we might touch on it a bit later of just like, but I think that getting people engaged in the idea of this is not a one-off request that we are building. We want to build a better system that's going to take care of the next 100, 200, 500 customers. And the AI features inside Pylon are actually quite good for building a great foundation on this with a less technical team of making sure that you have a well-managed knowledge base that has correct and up-to-date information in it that is covering the types of questions your customers are asking. Like that is already I think like the biggest part of the battle on this. So our tooling here is very specific to Brain Trust stack of we're building an application that is hosted and like managed as software internally, but it's using Claude Code, and you could have that same tooling like accessible to your team through a lot of different platforms of like any AI-enabled IDE can run it as well, a CLI running it. So I think like I don't know if there's like an easy way to get started on it, but like getting the most technical people you can engaged in the problem and like showing them the impact that can have for customers, I think that's like extremely motivating.
Makes sense. And then, yeah, I'll touch on this too with some of the workflows our teams are using internally. But basically, yeah, the first step is getting access. I think getting your team access to some of these tools if they don't already, especially the non-technical folks, and having some of the more technical people start plugging in all the right MCPs that for various tools that you might use in your stack. Pylon could be one of them, or yeah, kind of linear as Alex is showing in the screenshot, and all of your other kind of internal tools, and that can start to help you have a playground for like what workflows you can use. And I'll show a couple that we do as well in a second.
But yeah, like this tooling set, like this is one part of it. And like I have to give a huge shout out to Colin Bennett on my team for this. He has gone wild in building out feature sets for this. This suite includes semantic search across all those sources. It has access to our Datadog logging of like, are there any anomalies and what versions are customers running across this time? You can manage the KV articles through it and like draft AI generated initial drafts with like that's work from Evan on the team as well. Like there's a lot of people that are building tooling motivated towards this, but making sure that we can every time we're engaging with customers take those learnings out of it and get that back into the knowledge base of if we're deploying this level of help and thought on an issue, that should lead to it getting documented, it getting available for the next customer. And so like I really believe in few internal escalations or handoffs, putting high level, highly technical, highly like high ownership people onto solving this issue with the specific prompt of how do you make sure a second customer doesn't run into this? Let's engage with it on the first issue as thoughtfully and deeply as we can. But yeah, like you can run like test scripts and queries in the Brain Trust product inside of this. And like when this Claude backed agent is preparing next steps, it has access to all of these tools to validate its thinking. So that it's quite powerful, but it ends up leading to some like really cool experiences that I'm really proud of. Like this is an example where a customer wrote in with this kind of like low urgency UI bug, the reordering inside of just like a list of labels wasn't working anymore. And this is how like our Pylon Slack customer facing experience looks of there's a couple automated messages inside of here of when someone was assigned onto it. It like triggers a response back of just saying, hey, like I've been assigned to work on this. But this was like a couple minutes in, Barrett on the team saying like, hey, I'm looking at reproducing this. 10 minutes later, cool, I've got the reproduction on here. I'm going to work on a fix. And then we have this extremely cool process with our preview builds. Every time someone is working on a PR, it creates a publicly hosted preview branch on Vercel that you can then send to the customer and say, like, here's my patch on attempting a fix there. Can you pull this up, use your credentials, make sure that this works for you? And then, like, cool, like, that's validated. This is going through review. I'll see if anyone has any other feedback for me, but otherwise this will be live in the next build that goes out. So this was like within a couple hours of them writing in to someone saying, like, hey, I found this bug, something that probably wouldn't be extremely urgent or pressing to a lot of people. But rather than having the team file a bug report for this, like Barrett just shipped a PR for it, and was able to show the customer, like, we've taken this report really seriously. We've actually fixed this and taken some action here. And now a second customer won't run into the same thing, which is like incredible.
Makes sense. Nice. And I'll share my screen as well to kind of show a couple of our workflows here. I'll show one or two with Cursor and then one or two with Claude. So the first kind of workflow I'll show here is the way we do escalations. And so I'm inside of like a test Slack here, and I've reproduced this last night, but this is actually the way we run our escalation process. And I'll show you like kind of a cursor automation for how this works. And so the idea is you'll receive an issue in Pylon, and then our support team will kind of have some initial layers of context trying to work on it, and they'll escalate it in Slack, which is where our engineering team lives if they're not sure kind of how to proceed. And what we've now done is set up a cursor automation that every time an issue gets escalated into like a specific Slack channel, Cursor will automatically take a look at the issue, use the Pylon MCP to pull a bunch of context about what the customer specifically said, and then post what it thinks like a fix might be for an engineer to like quickly verify and merge. And then you can sort of close the loop the same way Alex mentioned. And the benefit here is like the closing the loop is very fast. Someone might report a bug or a small improvement, and we can put up a fix in like 10 minutes and kind of have this great customer experience. I'll also hop into Cursor just to kind of show you what this looks like and how you might be able to set it up yourself. So I'm inside of Cursor's web UI now in the automations tab. You can essentially set up a trigger where you're watching for like new messages in a given channel. And so the way our internal workflow works is we escalate issues into a given Slack channel. We call it bugs daily for like important bugs we want to swarm on and like kind of solve them the same day. And then a bunch of lower priority bugs that we still want to fix but are not like totally breaking anything. And so you can set up a trigger to listen to all those messages, set up a bunch of instructions that effectively uses like the Slack, the Pylon, the linear MCPs all together to try and fetch all the context that might be related to that issue, and then uses Cursor's code base understanding to actually make a pull request and submit that pull request and post the context back into the thread of like what it's done and what the fix might be. And so you can set this up in Cursor, and we'll send out more information afterwards just to show you what this kind of looks like in Pylon. So here's that issue. I didn't want to show any customer information, so I submitted the bug report myself as a customer. And so it's like a small bug report about like how these different logos aren't matching. I escalated this to a separate Slack channel asking for engineering help, and then Cursor automatically, you could see 6 minutes later, put up a fix for that specific issue. And now, support can pick this up and let the customer know. Engineering can verify that this fix is right and actually push it into the code base. So that's like an example of like a workflow for basically automating bugs. And just to hop back into this is a process we use internally of escalating into Slack. Cursor also lets you set up triggers for webhooks. And so you can make it so on a certain Pylon issue, you just add a field or add a tag onto the issue. And that kicks off Cursor essentially having to going up and looking through the issue, getting context from the Pylon MCP, and then putting up a bug fix. And so that's like an end-to-end workflow you could probably implement tomorrow if you're using Cursor to like just reduce the turnaround time dramatically on bugs or small improvements. So that's one workflow that we use internally. I will also hop to showing another workflow here. Let me know if you can still see my screen. I'm now inside Claude Code. And so here's another workflow our product team uses. Because Pylon has all this context on like what's going on with your kind of with all your customers and all the context of all the issues they've been raising. What you can basically do, and I'll scroll to the top here of an example I just ran right before this webinar started, is I'm basically asking Claude to write a product spec for a feature given this linear issue. This linear issue is tied to a bunch of customer evidence in Pylon. So, 10 different customers, I think, have asked for this specific feature of more customizability in their SLAs. I asked it to redact all the specific customer information, but essentially it's using the linear MCP, fetching a bunch of this a bunch of the information on the linear ticket. Then that linear ticket is linked to a bunch of Pylon issues, which are specific customer reports around that feature. And it's going and pulling all of the context related to that. Then it's essentially drafting a product spec. And we're actually using this end to end to like produce a lot of product specs now. It means you can keep, your kind of PM team lean, and you can actually produce still a lot of product specs for things. And so it's going through and summarizing what all the customer evidence is, what the proposed solution is. And Cursor or Claude Code has code-based context as well, so it can also develop an implementation plan for you and actually reference all of the asks against your code base. So that's another tactical workflow that you can kind of put into place basically tomorrow. And again, it relies on using all of these different tools in a reasonable way, so that when you actually write this prompt here in Claude Code to write a product spec, it has all the right context. The linear issues are tied to the Pylon issues. So when the AI pulls some data down, it can kind of monkey branch to even more data to get like the full understanding of the customer issue. So wanted to show that as well. And then I have one more thing I wanted to show. I'll stop sharing for a second so I can hop into this one other thing. And that is, you can also, and we've been using this more and more now, actually plug Pylon into any other internal tools that you might use. And so let me hop into this issue that just came in earlier this morning, right before our webinar. And so this is a customer asking about, a specific improvement in the product around one of our features. And what I can actually do now is I can call out to other tools like BrainTrust or PostHog or Linear or Notion, or really any tools that you might use, like third-party tools or anything you've built internally. And I can basically ask a question, and it'll basically go look through all of the data it has access to, not just in Pylon, but in those tools as well. And this basically lets your team build a lot of functionality outside of Pylon, whether that's the internal agents Alex and team are building, or just AI capabilities that other tools already surface. Like BrainTrust has an MCP where if a support person is debugging a specific AI issue, they can just call out to BrainTrust MCP and just get that data quickly to solve the ticket. So that's been pretty useful as well. Neat. So those are hopefully some workflows you can get started with pretty soon. Just as long as you're keeping all of your data in the right kind of places, and you're investing in a bunch of tools that have these AI capabilities. You don't need to have everything in one spot. You can kind of chain all of these tools together, using either kind of Claude or Cursor or ChatGPT as the driver, or in order to orchestrate a full workflow is the exciting part.
Yeah, I think there are many tools and players in the space of things that you can use to automate this. I think as long as it fits into a reasonable process of here where this would fit into how we're going to deliver this back to customers, you can get some really incredible results. I think would share something I found. We recently running a A/B test internally of having 50% of issues go to one internal note bot, 50% go to another, seeing how the team performed on, was one more helpful than the other on helping move people forward. And something we found that I found really interesting in those metrics is that so there's 9 people inside the sample group using those toolings. One person built one of those tools, one person built another of those tools, and across the performance metrics of how long a Pylon issue would stay waiting in a new or on you status over the life cycle of it, the best option was the one that someone built themselves for it. Of the one person who built one, where they were the most familiar with how it was implemented, it was the most helpful for them. Where someone built another one, it was the most helpful for them. There was then separately an aggregate on average people doing it, but I think that making sure that your team has an understanding of how the specific tool works under the hood, that's a huge help, because they'll be able to better spot oh, this could be incorrect or could be a hallucination in this scenario. They'll be better able to parse the advice that it's giving. So like none of these tools will work very well for people that don't understand what it is exactly recommending. And yeah, like a lot of the burden of reviewing potential fixes, like
Mhm.
you need to make sure you're enabling your team on what kind of changes could it be implementing, what access does it have, where would it
Yeah,
break or fall out there. Um,
totally.
I think as the
Yeah,
space like sizes more and people get more established in the workflows they're doing, there will be better defaults. But as stuff is like changing so much, like making sure that you have people with some time to experiment and learn is really important.
yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. And I think the meta point is basically that it goes back to the process point where it's like a lot of these tools are swap outable, whether you're using Claude to drive your workflows or Cursor. You just kind of want to actually know what the process is supposed to be end to end and what data is available at each step. And for a customer facing step, you don't want certain data to be available, but for internal steps, it's kind of fine if you have different people using different workflows as long as like it's all part of a broader process. That makes sense. Neat. If we go to the next slide, oh yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, I was
Uh,
just gonna say like,
yeah,
well,
and yeah, jumping to the next point around like now using AI for customer health, which is you were mentioning it earlier, where it's like some context about a customer is actually pretty useful and being able to like do a support workflow related to them, whether it's like knowing what tier they're on or what plan level they have, which means what features they have access to, or whether it's like knowing their sentiment or like that their renewal is coming up, or all these other data points that are pretty helpful. Like, how do you think about that stuff as it relates to like your support workflow? Yeah.
yeah, I think like there might have been a Q&A question a little bit about like who is working inside of Pylon. Like every single employee at Braintrust has access to Pylon and working in there, and then the actual issues that customers are working on span across sales and post sales and like engineering and support. There's the CEO is often in threads with customers working across this, and so like when we're looking at our customer health and gauging which accounts are in a bad state, one of the values in that is this aggregated field of there's an AI enriched field for issue sentiment for that specific thread that's like scored, from a -2 to +2 modifier on the advocate down to high risk or detractor ratings. Um, and that is just like a formula field at the account level in Pylon that gets from the last 90 days. What is the average on this? There's a little bit of like weighting in that calculation so that just one bad issue doesn't heavily weigh it. But I found that to actually be quite like pretty accurate when you're looking across a lot of customers of their typical sentiment when they're talking to you across all of these threads and these channels in email or Slack or Teams or wherever you have like Pylon integrated coverage on this. It's pretty neat of like thinking about the actual on average their sentiment and feelings of working with them.
Makes sense. And there was we can also try to incorporate some of the questions folks are asking as well as we're going. I'm curious, like how you think about the post sales. I see a question about kind of post sales handoff, or like you're obviously doing a lot of customer experience stuff. Is that just post sale? And then how do you think about like the handoff between both? Are you using AI there to like help the handoff? What tools are you using?
We are using AI to summarize account state at handoff a little bit, but also there are several teams at Braintrust that are pre and post sales specifically. That like our technical support motion is life cycle of this is just if customers are experiencing a pain point in the product
Hmm.
pre or sales, like then they're working with them, we're working them.
Yeah,
I do think having like work stream owners like that where it doesn't require a handoff like that is I will always advocate for processes that like natively need less handoffs are better for customers than processes that do handoff. We
yeah,
also have like our account executives, our lifecycle AEs, they're on the account from start to finish. Like so maintaining contact as much as you can is ideal. As you scale up, that gets harder and harder, but uh,
yeah,
having the AI generated summaries, AI reports in the internal channels for each account can be really helpful. And then also just as someone is, they're a new hire coming in, ramping up on account, being able to go into like the Ask AI like feature, all of our Gong transcripts are in there, all of our support issues are in there, all of our content of like communicating with this customer is visible there. So like that's a really nice source of knowledge and comms and like oddities of what have we ever discussed about this account.
Makes sense. And then there's two questions here related to like a previous point around like, yeah, so but sounds like both of our teams and a lot of teams are basically using, Claude or Cursor to put up changes. So like you have this whole stack of things, issues might get handled earlier in the stack, but some number of them result in like code changes, whether it's a bug fix or an improvement. Like, yeah, how do you like one question is around how do you like get the capacity on engineering to like actually review those? Like are these workflows just spewing out like hundreds of changes that need to be reviewed, and then also like how accurate are those changes? Like, yeah, does it require a lot of human touch, or is it at the point where it's like pretty good and yeah.
Yeah, I am incredibly lucky, I think, in like my team structure of like we're hiring very technical people to be recommending these changes in this case. So there are a lot of AI generated PRs, but also like that same person is reproducing and validating the issue at the same time. Were they actually able to pull up the specific problem the customer was hitting, and were they able to confirm the problem is resolved and they didn't see any other weird behavior in the proposed fix for it? So like maintaining that responsibility as close to the people who are like generating these suggestions is really important. I think that's
uh,
also true like docs or anything. Like if the person who is using an LLM to generate some kind of work doesn't have an understanding of what they're creating and is then asking a different team that doesn't have the customer context on why it matters, you're going to run into a lot of like disagreements around priority and understanding of impact for customers, because this is now a suggested fix that like the person reviewing it doesn't know why this was coming up or why this matters to people.
yeah.
So another point of like handoff will always have a friction and lost information. So front loading resources. As this is ramping up, like there are more changes and fixes and tweaks to review. I think that is a really good growth opportunity for people on the team. Of like we're going to be staffing a staff level developer support engineer role that is more aligned with specific product areas, and is like helping more junior team members review their PRs, understand what they should or shouldn't attempt to fix. And like, I also think that in talking about prioritization and talking about it with customers, having good guidance for your team on you are here to be a representative of the company to help communicate what our stance should be on this. And very often that stance will be this is not something that we could or should prioritize. I think like uh, how like where that priority bar, what happens or doesn't happen, is actually a lot less important than being able to empower your team to talk to customers about it, because that's always going to be a friction point, no matter how many resources you have. So what I've found to be really effective is being able to say back to customers like, hey, I personally have researched this issue across how other customers are running into this. This is where I'm seeing issues. This like echoing back your understanding of why this is coming up. And then even if the stance is like, I don't think this is something we'd be able to pick up right now, still being able to say that like this feedback, this context is tracked. It's part of how we're thinking about this. The next time we're doing a major overhaul here, this is now part of like your body of information in Pylon to do user research into. But like I find customers usually fairly receptive to like, hey, we want this platform to be the best for everyone. The way that you are looking at using it here, like I actually haven't seen that use case before. We're going to have to wait and see if we have more feedback along these lines. And as a customer like myself, I would much rather get a like, hey, we're not going to do this right now than, oh yeah, I filed this as a feature request. Because I don't know, like I'm still trying to build something this week, like should I wait for your feature request that may never come, or should we talk about workarounds?
Makes sense. That makes sense. And so tactically, I guess for you, it was like convergence of the person who has the customer context, who has the like context to like actually make the fix almost into one person, and that. I'll also share how we're doing it for prioritization. I think for us, it's more like a culture solve, where it's like people on we have a less technical support team than Alex does, so the support team is often still doing a first line investigation, but we just have a culture where we want to fix bugs very fast, and so now we have all the tooling to actually make that happen, because you can use Cursor or Claude to put up PRs very fast, and engineering is just like focused on making sure that bugs, so it's still a process solve is the main thing. It's like process plus culture. People know that bugs are important and stuff we want to fix. Now people can fix them really fast, so it actually doesn't take away that much time or as much time as it used to, and then we can like keep going quickly. And so and then there's one more question around like basically how accurate are like some of these one-shot fixes. I was showing a workflow with Cursor where it just like tries to put up a PR. We find it's still both like a context plus like, are you routing the right type of thing to those? You can't have it build a whole feature randomly just because a customer asked for it. You then have other risks you run into. But if it's a pretty, obvious tightly scoped bug and it has access to all the other tools it needs, like in our case, it has access to Pylon MCP, so it sees the full customer contacts, all the screenshots they posted, any previous investigation the support person did already. It has access to like our internal logs and Brain Trust and CloudWatch, and so it can like go and find all the specific information it needs. It does a quite good job pretty often. It's like often right on issues. Yeah, I don't know if you're seeing anything different or how you think about basically like putting up the fixes for these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll move to this next
Yeah.
slide. I think it's all like on the same topic with it, but yeah, I think that like if it is a tightly scoped, inarguable bug that is like easily reproducible, here it is, and if the thread or the context of like explaining what is happening here is clearly saying that, it can be quite good at it. I would, if you are trying to generate a new feature from scratch or support for something that does not exist today, like then you have to be a lot more intentional with how you're setting up your coding agent and like, all right, do you actually have like guidance for what you wanted to implement on this? But it's like, hey, there's a pothole here. Could there not be a pothole? That would be great. Like a coding agent doesn't need much guidance to like fill it.
Yeah. No, agree. Yeah, bugs feel very like steady state now in terms of being able to automate them, and feature improvements, small improvements, like still, pretty reasonable. And then net new, quite not worth it to just randomly spin up agents to just totally do it, and still want like an engineer or a product person driving those.
Yeah, I would also argue that's not the kind of thing you want to do in high volume. Of like,
Sure.
you don't want 10,000 features in your product that all now exist because it was really easy to generate them. You want like features that work really well together and meet like a clear need. So I actually generally believe that feedback from one customer shouldn't clearly dictate your roadmap. So like what we're talking about here is like how you react to day-to-day feedback, how you make people feel heard, how you manage quality and improvements, and like documentation, knowledge management. Like I think that's all the day-to-day what we should do for one customer, and then we should be really thoughtful about what should we implement for all customers.
Makes sense. And then on this point, like, are you seeing? I know you mentioned lots of people on your team are using Pylon or Pylon data. I'm just curious, like how whether like lots of people on your team are essentially able to bring Pylon data into their workflows and what exactly they're doing if they're not on the support team or like some of the immediately adjacent teams. Like what is your founder like doing with Pylon data, or like using ChatGPT or Claude or Cursor for in this context?
Yeah, the account health was one example of like, hey, your Pylon instance is set up super well. It seems like you have a clear process. Can we manage customer health through this? Of like people realizing as the process and structure gets more visible, like there's some information here that could help inform this. I've gotten asked as well from like the product and eng teams of like, hey, we're thinking about changing this thing. What do you think that might mean for customers here? And being able to use Ask AI and also just like give that to them of like, hey, you can ask whatever you want about like this. And having the strict filters in those searches of like, we have the AI enriched fields by product area of like, you want to ask about this specific feature and see what people are thinking about it, or by plan level or by account stage or whatever, like being able to segment that's really useful. That's also been something that's been really helpful for our docs team and our docs lead of like, hey, I'm thinking about restructuring our guidance on how you set up this particular feature. Like here's the current values for this. Like give me a critique of compared to what customers are normally running into. Like where are we missing here? And so I think like the knowledge has had like a really positive, strong response of we have AI workflows that are every single time a PR is merging in the code base, evaluating our knowledge base and docs for what now needs to change immediately and drafting like suggested changes in there with some Claude skills on how you evaluate context about brain trust, but also context about customers in these changes. And the same thing whenever a Pylon issue closes, running that same knowledge gap analysis of like, hey, what do we know about customers and our product and how people are using it? How can we document that now so that the second customer or 10th customer that runs into this is more likely to be able to figure it out and we can make this a little for them.
Makes sense. And then I see two questions here around like one, like, does support at Brain Trust roll up into product, or like kind of where does it sit within the org? And then also, like, as we're talking about the convergence of roles, I guess, like, how do you think about support versus CS? Like, are they both doing the same thing now, or what do you think the end state is, or the ideal?
Yeah, it's not the most normal tiling for it, but I am head of customer experience and I report into the CEO, and our team is part of the engineering and product org at Brain Trust.
Got it.
And like I feel really strongly that that is where support is most aligned. It's really easy to speak to the impact of making the product easier to use and less painful and reducing friction. So I think of like the experience part of that in very present tense of like, what does it feel like when your customers are touching the product? Does it hurt? Is it like sharp on the edges? What does that thing? How can we make that a little bit easier? How can we do like iterative improvements on what exists there so that it's just a little smoother? So yeah, we're
Makes
part
sense.
of the product eng org at Braintrust.
Nice. And same at Pylon, where support, success, and engineering all actually are very close together and report together. And then the one other question was like, yeah, how do you think about support versus CS in terms of like, are they doing different things now? Is it more converged where like they have access to all this data and AI tools so they can actually both cover answering reactive questions and doing proactive motions? And what's the final state in your mind?
Uh, I think they are different things still. I think that support is current state, like, and how we can make things easier for people. I think that CS should be customer specific, account specific. What is the roadmap that this specific group is trying to accomplish with your product? What do we need to help them deliver on 6 months from now, 12 months from now? All of that context can be like inside the same sort of truth inside Pylon. And it probably should be because it is really helpful if someone is asking a question that is informed by what we've told them in different channels or what they're trying to do. So that can come up in the reactive mode as well. But like, I do think that there is significant value in having someone who's thinking about what does this customer need from us long
Mm-hmm.
term. Um, and I think that the trade-offs and priorities are different than what do all customers need on average from the product.
Got it. Makes sense. Um, there's a question here about basically one, like in the enrichment step, I guess, like what data do you actually enrich with, or like what integrations do you use to actually make sure you have like all of your customer data enriched? And then two, like there's a bunch of tools now, like where's the source of truth, or have you changed how you think about the source of truth for like where you go to like say understand where your customers are, or does it even matter anymore if like you can just pull data from each tool from other tools? How do you think about all that?
It's kind of spider webby when you think about
Yeah,
how like the ETL of what is thinking into what.
yeah.
Um, we have a lot of stuff has to end up in Salesforce though.
Hmm.
So I would say like 80-90% of the customer context is there. If it is larger in content, like page view histories or audit logs or um,
Like
metrics
every
on
message they've ever sent. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think like that gets a little bit trickier and is usually in like separate product databases specifically that are linked out in those places. But like the agents are have access to MCPs that can access those and like
Right.
know to some degree when to implement it. But there's uh, everything is either syncing directly into Pylon through the API, or it is syncing into Salesforce and then down from Salesforce through the CRM integration.
Makes sense. And basically meta point might be there's like yeah, way more fluidity between systems now. So like a lot of systems, both the thing taking action with might be your agents, like human or support agents or just people in your company can like access data from a bunch of different sources as long as all these tools can like, have MCPs or have a way to pull the data out,
Yeah.
or like it seems like you can also go into a lot of tools directly and there's still maybe the mental model for like which ones are the source of truth hasn't changed that much from before. Um, uh, it's just that yeah, you can now access the data more easily.
Yeah. I think you have to be thoughtful around like data freshness
Sure.
and data availability of like how long it will take to sync. But most of the time, we're not working under timelines of like milliseconds of like needing exact availability there. And if you ever do, then you probably have to be directly querying that system.
Makes sense. Cool. And then one point I also, there's a couple of questions that are very in the weeds Pylon specific from Sabrina, which I think we'll just shoot answers to after the fact, around like how specifically customer health scores are configured or whether you can access specific data. But to touch on one higher level question for everyone is like, yeah, you guys invest a lot, like despite you guys being probably one of the most AI forward companies, like both in your product and like your team, like you still invest a lot in like human support, so to speak, which might be, I don't know, there might be dissonance in terms of like how people think the space is moving. I'm curious like how you think about that. Like why do you, yeah, why do you have such great people on your support team and like care so much about support and are not just trying to like automate everything?
Yeah, I believe really strongly that we are providing support for customers and we are investing at this level specifically to make the platform better. Of I think that if we don't invest like this, then 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we will be at a significant disadvantage than we would be otherwise. And I think like the way we invest is very much at like level of technical knowledge and capabilities of like twice as many people that were more generalist hires wouldn't be able to have the same output of this. And like I think that when you are thinking about solving problems versus answering questions, I
Mm-hmm.
think that engaging like this builds a lot of customer loyalty. By like we have highly available support in Slack. I've done a lot of support through Slack over the years. Pylon is definitely the best Slack support platform like that exists. But like being highly available to customers means they will reach out for friction more often because they trust that you will do something about it. And when you have more visibility into that friction, you are able to solve more of it. You're able to make the experience easier. You're able to onboard new customers faster. So I think it's like, I guess the way I'm thinking about it is we are investing a lot less in support than we would otherwise over the next 5 years if we didn't
Got it.
invest like this. Like we are solving problems that we would like to not have be permanent problems.
Makes sense. So yeah, less of like a cost center, like deflect questions mentality, more like a, oh, like we're actually producing a lot of other outcomes for the company, so to speak, like products improving, like yeah, you're staying closer to your customer, so maybe you're getting more feedback, and maybe you're able to drive a bunch of other outcomes, not because you're not totally focused. Or yeah,
Maybe one other thing on this
yeah,
that like especially with the AI boom, a lot of pricing models have switched more towards usage and wanting to get people using your product as much as you can and moving quickly through it. And that's something that like good support is extremely directly linked to. Of like if they aren't unblocked, if they aren't able to build their use case, ask configuration questions, troubleshoot things, they are not adopting your product. They are not paying you more money for usage. And they also probably have less faith that they should keep increasing their usage in your platform because like when something goes wrong, it takes a long time to get an answer. When like the platform's buggy, like your support person is just saying, I've filed a feature request for this, we'll let you know if it ever happens. Like I I'm going to go towards the company that is providing better support on that.
makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Any other kind of thoughts on like basically how people can essentially use their support data in kind of these other tools, maybe help enable other functions across the company, who are already maybe using Claude or ChatGPT or Cursor, whether it's like in technical teams, like for bug fixes, or whether it's like non-technical teams just trying to discover insights, like any like things that have come up internally at Brain Trust that are interesting. I'll start with one more final thing, which is another use case. Our marketing team has been basically using a lot of support data combined with other data for essentially like case study writing or identification, which is like you can actually figure out, it's hard to have context on every single customer and know exactly how they're using a product and like like what specific things you want to highlight. But if you have all of that customer data somewhere, even if it's split between some tools, you can use something like Claude or ChatGPT the same way we were showing drafting the product spec. You can like draft a case study as well, and it's pretty good if it has access to all the calls you've had with that customer, all the support tickets they've ever submitted. You can kind of know how they're using your product, whether they like it. So who you should write a case study about and what the case study should be about is actually pretty solvable as well.
Yeah, I think there's a very solid use case around like managing post-sales customers, account managers that are like checking in on what has happened over the last week, month, how are we trending towards what we know with that. I think reporting is very valuable for that, being able to set like a consistent cadence on it. There's so much information and like there's so many communications, there's so many things that would be impossible to stay on top of. So I think like knowing what matters to a particular customer for the account team, the like go-to-market team that is thinking about it is very valuable. I think working from the same knowledge base is also extremely, extremely valuable and high leverage. Of everyone who's using your product, talking to customers, is going to run into problems. If you have a good shared knowledge base for that, that people know how to contribute towards, like that is a huge game changer of getting people motivated towards like, hey, I am a solution engineer. I'm an architect. I'm exploring this use case. I found this oddity in it, or I had this really cool best practice recommendation for folks. Getting that added into the like knowledge and like interaction gestalt of like
Sure.
information. That gives you a stronger foundation for like like when people are using the coding agents, that also has access to the same knowledge base here. So
Yeah.
I think we're see really interesting emerging behaviors over the next few years where like if you document a customer pain point, it may fix itself at some point in the future.
Sure. Makes sense. That makes sense. We're a bit over, but one last question because this is a great question. Is like if you're a technical person or somewhat technical and you like understand MCPs, you like have plugged them into these tools, like, but you, how do you actually? What would be a tactical thing you can do to like figure out how to wire everything together? Because that seems like the key here is like, different tools might have different MCPs, but it's all about like getting the data in the right spot at the right time in order for you to like do your workflow or get your questions answered. Anything come to mind for like how did someone take that step of like, yeah, having a rough understanding of everything and being technical to like wiring stuff up to have this like cool end-to-end workflow that you guys have?
Mm. I think I will go back again to document your end-to-end workflow that you want. Think about where the tools would fit into that and the flow between them of what they would have access to. I think that will, like, for your specific process, your specific team and access, that will point itself towards the like solution pretty neatly. If we need this information at this time in this tool, like it has to exist at some point there. I think also like working back from the impact from customers that for customers that you want to see can like help inform that if you're ever unsure.
Makes sense. Cool. Well, yeah, Alex, thanks for taking the time to chat. It was fun, and yeah, for everyone else, we'll follow up with the recording and also like more zoomed in screenshots of a bunch of the stuff as well as like some of the workflows we shared. We'll like write up and send out.
Well, thanks so
Cool.
much. It was
Okay. Thanks, everyone.